Hey Campfire Crew, welcome to this special episode of Scary Christmas Stories here on Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. Thanks for sending these in, and my apologies for not getting to some of these for almost a year, as some of them came in a little bit late for last year's True Scary Christmas Story special. Also, my apologies for my German, and that goes straight to Anna, who sent in a story. I grew up in a French-speaking family. My mom was a French teacher, and that's about as close as I can get to it. A little bit of Spanish, but not so much German. Anyway, I'm going to shut up. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy this. Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's get it on. Christmas Break-In, submitted by Charlie44. When I was 13 years old, my parents had just started letting me stay home alone with my kid brother, Alex. He was 10 at the time. Just before Christmas that year, my parents had to run out, presumably to do some more holiday shopping, and left us home on a snowy afternoon. I took Alex outside to build a snow fort in the backyard, and then we did what all brothers do, started wrestling and fighting and having a great time. My mom hated when we played like this, and I'm sure some people thought we were serious, but no one had any idea we were just having fun. But I digress. Anyway, we wrecked the snow fort, and I asked Alex if he was cold and if he wanted to go in, and he said yeah, so we went in, through the kitchen, and straight down to the basement to take our snowsuits and stuff off. I made some soup while my brother was snooping around the presents under the tree, and I kept telling him that all the stuff was for family and not the stuff Santa was bringing. A million questions why Santa didn't deliver family presents, and a million answers from me. He didn't really believe in Santa, but he was always coming up with stuff like this because he knew it drove my mom nuts. We ate and decided to play Nintendo, which was in our basement rec room. Our laundry and my dad's workshop were also down there, and this worked out as I had laundry to do, and I also wanted to fix the footbed on my hockey skates. I could do all that while keeping an eye on Alex, and not that he really needed it anyway. So, he was playing away, I was messing with my skates and changing the wash and dry stuff, when we heard a car door shut in our driveway. I figured my parents were home, but it was odd that they didn't park in the garage. Maybe they have presents to unload, I thought, and I finished up what I was doing and went out with Alex. We had those glass block windows up near the ceiling of the basement on 3 walls, the sides of the house and the back of the house. I saw a shadow on the non-driveway window go by and thought that was even stranger than what I had just heard. Why would my mom or dad be over in the snow walking around the house? Alex was really into Mario or whatever and was not paying attention. I went back to the laundry room, and I saw a shape walk by that window too, and now I knew something was up. I went back to Alex and told him to pause the game for a minute, and he did, and he asked me what was up, and I told him that I thought someone was walking around the house, and it wasn't Dad. Right at that moment, I heard someone at the back door and was hoping to God I had it locked. I did. But that proved moot, because a few minutes later, we heard the glass break, and knew whoever it was had broken the window on the door. There was some scuffling, and then we heard footsteps walking through the kitchen, into the dining room, and then into our living room. I tiptoed over to the wall and flicked off the lights, turned the TV off, and told Alex to follow me. I got him under the basement stairs and then started to pile up some boxes in front of us. He kept asking what was going on, but I told him to shut up and that someone was in the house, and we had to be quiet. "Can't we call the police?" he whispered. We still had wall phones back then, and they were all upstairs, so that idea was out. "Just be quiet," I told him. We listened as the person moved through the house and went back outside. I started to get up, but whoever it was came back in and then went upstairs to our bedrooms. The person came down and went back outside, and I hoped he was leaving for good, and I could call the cops then. But to my horror, he came back in, and this time started coming down the basement stairs. His, and I can say he because I saw it was a guy in just a second, came down the stairs right over us, and we could hear him talking to himself. We heard him grab our Nintendo, and then he said, "Fuck the TV," and then walked into the laundry area right where we were hiding. Through the boxes, I could see a tall man with pantyhose over his head, and he was poking around looking for more stuff to steal. My brother was shaking and holding his breath, but he shifted his weight a little, and his foot kicked out and hit a box. The guy immediately stopped and started looking around the room. He came back near the stairs where we were hiding, and for just a second his eyes found mine in the dark, and I saw them get really big. He just said, "Oh shit," dropped the Nintendo on a pile of laundry, and then he tore across the room and up the stairs and out the back door. I ran out as fast as I could after him and heard him start up a car or a truck. I ran to the front of the house in time to see a beat-up red Ford pickup pulling out of our driveway, and I was only able to get 3 numbers off the plate. My brother was now crying, and I told him to just hook his Nintendo back up while I called the police, and then my neighbors, and then my grandfather. My friend Bill's family lived 2 doors down, and they all came over just as the police arrived, and not long after, my grandparents showed up, and they lived on the other side of town. The police asked both of us all sorts of questions, and of course my parents got there when all this was happening. My mother burst into tears, and Dad talked with the officers for a while, and then they left. My grandfather and Dad fixed the back door window as best they could for the time being, and Mom checked to see what was gone. All of the presents under the tree were taken, as well as a bunch of my mom's underwear and nightgowns and things. My dad had stashed a lot of our presents way in the back of his closet, and the robber never looked there. Around about dinner time, the police called and asked if they could stop by with the suspect to see if I could identify him. And they brought him all right, complete with his beat-up truck. They shined lights on him, and I knew right away it was him. And they caught him at a local bar when an officer saw his truck parked outside and confirmed the 3 numbers that we had given him off the plate. Some thief. He robs a house and then goes to get his drink on in the same town. Dumbass. We got all of our stuff back, and I didn't know this until I was well into my 30s, but my mom threw out all of her clothes and stuff that he had taken. Not only did the guy go to a bar like an idiot, he had repeatedly masturbated with my mom's things in his truck. Gross. So, I was removed from everything after that, but I know the guy went to jail, and that was that. We ended up having a great Christmas, but that was a really scary day for me and my brother. So happy nothing bad happened to us, because it sure could have. What Was in the Forest? Submitted by Pat Not So Bold. This took place when I was just out of college and in my first apartment with my friends Eric and John. My name is Pat, but I've changed the names to protect the innocent. We were all sitting around one snowy night at the beginning of December 1999, watching a movie and partaking in some holiday cheer in a typical 20-something guy house. Lots of beer signs on the walls, bad furniture, and a giant pile of dishes in the sink. We were planning on having a holiday party and talking about cleaning the place up, getting some new slipcovers for the couches and chairs, and Eric brought up the fact that we needed a tree. He said his uncle owned a tree farm the next county over, and we lived in Binghamton, New York at the time, and he was going to call him to see if we could go out there and cut down a tree that night. His uncle was cool and said, "Go ahead and leave a few bucks in a spot on the lot that only he would know was there." It was about 10:30 at night, and the normal operation was closed, but his uncle told us to bring flashlights and keep the tree to a 7-footer. He said it would be his Merry Christmas to us. I went to our basement and grabbed my camp saw from my camping gear, and we all got dressed for the cold. John was warming up his Xterra and had some tie-downs for the tree, and Eric put some roadies in a cooler. The farm was over in Delaware County and about 20 miles away, so in went a Fish live show to the CD player. Everyone lit up a smoke, and off we went into the dark down 86. It was snowing lightly when we got there, and Eric immediately went to the secret spot and left a 10 for the tree. I snagged a beer, and we began walking through the tree farm looking for our prize. There was a lot of laughing and joking going on, but we were also seriously looking for a decent tree. Things got quiet. You know that really deep snow quiet? I guess if you don't live in an area that gets a lot of snow, you might not feel how quiet and soft everything feels. And then we heard something I can only describe as a whoop or something like that, but not like a peacock makes it sound. I mean, this was bassy and was coming from off to the right where the real thick Russian pine started at the edge of the tree farm. We all stopped walking and looked at each other. John said what we were all thinking. What the fuck was that? It wasn't a coyote call or a bear grunting, and both animals were in that area. This was too, I don't know how to say it, well, human, I guess. We all shrugged and kept trudging along looking for a tree, but I'll admit, I was looking over at the forest every once in a while, wondering what was out there. "Hey, here's one," said Eric, and we played our flashlights on a tree, and it was perfect. Super full, and we knew this was the one. So I got out my folding saw, knelt down under the boughs, and began to saw out the trunk. I was about halfway through, and that whooping came again. We all stopped and listened to another sound what seemed to be a little bit farther away, but it sounded like branches breaking or something pounding branches together. There was another whoop, more thumping, and John said, "Cut this fucking thing down and let's just get out of here." "You big pussy, what are you, scared?" said Eric. And I looked at John, and as he said, "Hey, I don't know what the hell's making that sound, but it's not any animal I've ever heard. Have you?" I shook my head, and Eric said it was probably just some guys messing around out in the woods. "Well, fuck that too. Let's just hurry up and get out of here." I got back to work, and after another few minutes, the tree was down, and Eric grabbed the trunk. I picked up the top, and John was leading the way back to the truck with a flashlight. The other thing about snow, if you're not familiar with it, even on dark nights, the brightness of it makes everything lighter around you, and you can see a little bit, especially the outlines and shapes of anything dark. We were moving along, and then came that noise again. This time it seemed a little closer. And then I also noticed we were getting closer to the forest rather than farther from it. And then I said something to Eric. He looked around and realized it too, and then yelled at John, "Hey, dickhead, where the hell are you leading us? This isn't the way we came." John said he was just following the footprints in the snow, and we both groaned out loud. "Dude, do you realize how many people have walked around here all day, you idiot?" I told John to start bearing to the right as we reached the edge of the farm. There was a big space of field before the pines, and I was the first to see it. This thing at the edge of the forest. It was big and very dark, even on the darkness of the trees. I couldn't really say for sure, but I would say it was at least 7 feet tall, and whatever it was, it just stood there. I couldn't tell if it was facing us or facing away from us, but there was a deeper whoop that filled the air, and I realized just how close it was to us. "Guys, get moving. Let's go." "Oh, fuck," I said, trying to push the tree forward. Eric looked over and saw it and said, "Oh, shit, what is that?" I yelled to John to go, and Eric and I tried to run with the tree. After a minute, I looked back, and whatever this thing was, it was following us at a distance. I could see it standing in between Christmas trees every time I looked back. We got to the truck after a bit, and Eric dropped the trunk, as John scrambled to the truck to get the tie-downs. I told John to help me get the tree on the roof of the car, and we heaved it up there. The two of them got to strapping it down to the roof rack, when John froze looking over our shoulders at the edge of the farm. "Oh no, guys. Oh no, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up!" I followed his gaze and saw the thing was standing at the edge of the Christmas trees watching us. The air was split with another whoop from the other side of the truck, and my eyes turned to the other side of the parking lot. There was another one of these things standing there, but it was bigger than the other one. I called out hello for some reason, and suddenly a big tree branch came crashing down right behind me, and I jumped. I yelled out and said, "Guys, strap it down. Let's get the fuck out of here." Eric hadn't seen any of this as he was wrenching the tie-downs. He was only reacting to me and John. We all piled into the truck, and Eric started it up, and the lights came on to yet another one of these things, about 20 yards from the truck. A piece of ice smashed onto the hood of the truck, leaving a little dent, and John hit the gas, and it took a second for the four-wheel deal to kick in, and we made a giant turn to get out of there. The light hit two of the things standing there, and through the glass and over the engine, we heard the whooping again, this time so loud it hurt our ears. We got out onto the road and sped the hell out of there and back to our house, all of us in shock and jabbering away at what had just happened and what we had seen. I said aloud, "Guys, that shit was Bigfoot," and neither of them disagreed. We all grabbed a beer and a cigarette and didn't talk for a while. When we got back to our place, we dragged the tree inside, and Eric called his uncle to tell him what had happened. His uncle was quiet and then said, "Well, I've never heard or seen anything like that out there, but I know a lot of people who have." He changed the subject quickly and asked if we got a tree. We said yes, and he simply replied, "Well, there's that. Merry Christmas. I have to work in the morning." And he hung up. I am convinced that we saw Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever you want to call it, and there were at least 3 of them. I mean, we saw them with our own eyes. Looking back, I don't think they wanted us around that night, but I don't know why. Maybe they had food in the farm and came to eat it at night. I mean, who knows? But what I do know is when I go to get live trees now, I either cut one down during the bright sunshine of the day or get one off the lot at Home Depot. We still talk about that night to this day when we see each other. And I can't say for sure what we saw, but I'm almost positive it's the creature that science says doesn't exist. I sure wish there was a scientist or someone out there with us when it happened. Happy holidays to everyone out there. Be safe. Christmas Ghost, submitted by Addie John. My wife and I bought our first house in 2010, and not long after that, had our first baby, a little boy we named Mason. It was a small Cape Cod in a suburban neighborhood, built in the 50s as part of the nuclear family explosion. It was small but cozy for the 3 of us, and plus one of the rooms upstairs served as my home office. I was not a believer in the paranormal in any way, shape, or form, and neither was my wife, or so I thought. Back then, I was called away on business a lot when my son was about 2 years old, and I hated being away for the days I was out of town, but hey, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? One night, about a week from Christmas, I was in Chicago, and we lived in Peoria, and my wife called me saying something strange was going on at home. She told me our son was talking to someone or something whenever she left him alone for a minute. He'd be playing with his toys, but then he would start saying things and answering questions, or so it seemed to my wife. I told her it was probably nothing, but if she wanted to explore it more, record it without Mason knowing so it would be more natural and we could play it back and see exactly what he was saying, as he would stop as soon as she came into the room or wherever he was. My trip was over the next day, and I would fly home and have the next 2 weeks off to be with the family. My wife was settled down, and I told her to use my little Sony digital voice recorder. It was in my office desk drawer. The next day, I got home and raced home. My family was at the kitchen table and looking strange, so after a kiss and a hug, I asked her what was up. She said to grab a beer and listen to what she had recorded that morning. At first, there was just the noises of Mason playing with his cars, and then it was him clearly talking. This is a rough excerpt of it. I'm paraphrasing, and I don't have the recordings anymore.
"Hi. Yes. Yes. Yellow car. I like him. I like him. Yes. No. No. Mommy and Daddy can come too."
Obviously, it was like a 2-year-old talks, but we could tell that's what he was saying. "What do you think?" asked my wife. I shook my head and said, "I don't know, imaginary friend?" We talked about it for a while, and then we decided it was no big deal, just Mason being a little kid and wanting to chat. That night, I couldn't sleep, and I sat in the living room watching TV. My chair was against a wall that was the staircase going upstairs directly behind me. The upstairs has 2 rooms, as I mentioned, divided by a bathroom, and I thought I heard the sink faucet turn on and then stay running. I got up and stuck my head up the stairs to see what was going on, and there was silence. I sat back down and kept watching SportsCenter when I heard the noise again. And this time I started up the stairs and saw what I can only describe as a white shadow-like thing glide from our guest room and go into my office. It was misty-like, and I could see through it, and I just kept continuing upstairs, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me. But as I looked into my office, a stack of papers had lifted up and then fell onto the floor, as if someone had just walked by the desk quickly and caused a little breeze. Again, I didn't believe in ghosts or whatever, so I was trying to figure out what was going on and summed it up to being a blast from the forced air system preceded by a plane or something flying over the house with its lights on or something. Yeah, the theories we come up with when we can't explain something. I went back downstairs and went to bed and didn't mention any of this to my wife. I did, however, keep recording Mason to see if he'd say anything else, but it was similar to what I've already shared. That day, though, things started moving around on their own. And I'm not talking missing car keys or the TV remote. I'm talking big objects. My wife had been making cookies and was having trouble with her mixer, so I took it down to my basement to mess around with it and get it running smoothly again. I went upstairs to use the bathroom at one point, and when I went back downstairs, the mixer was no longer on my workbench. I just stood there staring and thought, well, maybe my wife came down and took it back while I was going to the bathroom. So I called up to her, "Sharon!" She didn't answer. I then remembered she had taken Mason to get a new pair of church shoes. I was home alone. I went back up to the kitchen, and there was the mixer on the counter. I couldn't believe it. Had I brought it up here and just forgotten that I had done that? It was weird. I took it back downstairs and finished cleaning it up and gave it a test run. The wife would be happy that it was running. The phone rang, and I grabbed our cordless and started talking to my best friend who was coming back to town for Christmas. He wanted to come over and see Mason. We talked for about 15 minutes, and me wanting to tell someone about the mixer incident, but I kept it to myself. I did some laundry and then went back to the mixer, but lo and behold, once again it was no longer on my workbench. I flew upstairs, and sure enough, there it was on the kitchen counter. I stood staring at it again, wondering just what was going on in my house. It was only just after noon, but I got a beer out of the fridge and then went up to my office. I needed to do some research about things like this. So, to the internet I went, and of course I found some good information and a whole lot of nonsense. The stuff some people believe is amazing to me. Again, I kept all this to myself, and for the next 2 days, more stuff was being moved around, and finally Sharon brought it up to me and asked if I had noticed. I said yeah, and then finally told her about the mixer. While we were talking, we heard Mason almost yell out, "No!" from the other room, and then another, "No!" And then he started crying for my wife, and we rushed in to see him sitting on the carpet with his blocks and stuff, and he was bawling his eyes out. Sharon scooped him up and soothed him, asking him what was going on and what was wrong, and just doing her mom thing. He just kept saying no and scare over and over. He calmed down, and the two of them went into the kitchen for a cookie, and I looked down at the recorder. I stopped and took it upstairs to see if there was anything on it. I played it back, and as skeptical as I am, my blood went cold. Before Mason yelled out, you could hear a very creepy laugh in the background. It was faint, but it was there. Then I heard a deep voice say, "Come with me." And then Mason's louder voice scream out, "No." I sat dumbfounded. What was I going to do with this? Mason took a nap, and I grabbed my wife and said, "I don't know what to do about this, but you need to listen." I played it for her, and her face went white. "What is that, Tim?" she asked. I said, "I have no idea, but I don't think it's good." She was quiet for a long time and then said, "I've got to be honest with you about something." She got up and went to our bedroom and came back with a box. It was a Ouija board. I almost laughed, but I caught myself. Again, I didn't believe in that silly stuff. It's a freaking piece of masonite, and that's it. But Sharon quickly told me she'd been using it to talk to people as she was lonely at home and only got out to see friends once in a while during the week while I was gone. It was something to do to pass the time. She was upset and crying about it. I just looked at her and said, "Sweetheart, relax. If you think you're to blame for this, don't. That thing is just a toy." And I was just trying to be reassuring. Just then there was a crash from upstairs, so I ran up to see what was going on and saw that a drawer from a dresser in our guest bedroom had pulled all the way out and smashed down to the floor. My wife was right behind me, and we both watched as 2 top shelves of the dresser came out and also fell down on the floor. I pushed her back, said, "Get Mason and take him to your mom's," and I shut the door. "What are you going to do?" she asked, tears coming from fear. "I'm calling Reverend Pete. You two just get out of here for a bit, okay?" She agreed, got Mason together, and went to her mom's, and I called our pastor, and he said he'd be right over. I sat in my office wondering what the heck was going on, but was glad that Sharon and Mason had taken off. Reverend Pete and I sat in the kitchen when he came over, and we had coffee while I told him what was going on. I explained everything, played him the recordings, and told him that I couldn't figure it out. Then he heard the laugh and the voice. He didn't try to bamboozle me. He was up front with his belief that it was part of spiritual warfare going on, and that we needed to pray as a family. He walked me to every room and blessed each one, and prayed and told me to get rid of the Ouija board. Game or no game, he said, that does not belong in your family. And then he did something I never would have expected. He gave me the number of one of his close friends, a Native American shaman and also a Christian. His name was Ron, and he was from the Illini people now living in Oklahoma. Reverend Pete said to call him and tell him what was going on for a different perspective. He left me with a blessed relic and prayed over me one more time and said to keep him informed of what was going on and to call immediately if we needed him. He left, and I sat looking at the phone number of this Ron and finally called. He happened to be visiting family in Galesburg, which was only about 45 minutes away. He said he'd be happy to stop over if I would like that, and desperate at this point, I said yes. So we made arrangements for him to come over the next day, Christmas Eve. When Sharon got home, I told her everything that had gone down, and she seemed to be a little less scared. And that's when the pounding started in the guest room. These massive blows to the walls and floor kept going on for about 10 minutes, and then they stopped. We just sat in the living room trying to keep Mason busy. He didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, which was good. I didn't sleep at all that night, listening to strange noises coming from the guest bedroom. Whispering voices, things moving around. At least there was no more pounding or dresser drawers flying around, I thought. The next day, Ron showed up with a friend of his named Tennille, and both of them were very nice. Over coffee, we talked about what was going on, and they both listened patiently and nodded, and even when there was a few loud thumps from upstairs, they seemed unfazed. Reverend Pete then rang the bell, and I let him in. We all discussed what to do, and Ron said we should pray while he and Tennille burned some sage and did some other native praying too. With Mason in my arms, we again went room to room praying and what Ron called smudging. Sharon was right with me, and we made our way upstairs to the guest bedroom. I reached for the knob, and it seemed very warm to the touch, and at first it wouldn't turn. I had to wrench on it, and finally push my way in. The room was in chaos. There were objects like perfume bottles and picture frames thrown all over the room, and some of them broken and in pieces. Roy and Tennille remained unfazed and walked right in doing their thing. And suddenly there was a loud pounding on the closet door, and it flew open only to reveal clothes hanging there, but then the door slammed shut. Reverend Pete was praying, and we heard one last shriek that faded away, and then everything stopped. The house was quiet. I gave Mason to my wife and started picking up the broken stuff and put the dresser drawers back. I took all of the broken items out of the room and put them in the garbage, and then we all went back downstairs. And that was it. We had more coffee, and Reverend Pete blessed the house and us one more time, and Roy and Tennille said to call again if we needed anything, and that they were happy to meet us and help. We said Merry Christmas, and they all left. We ended up having a great holiday, and never had any issues again, and we moved just this last year. I can't explain what happened or why it happened, but it did. As fast as it came, it went away, and I'm still skeptical about everything, but I know this. I can't say what was in our house, and I can't say what made it leave. But I didn't care, and I don't care now. It was gone, and that's all I wanted. That really happened. Merry Christmas, everyone. Creep at the Resort, submitted by Unfreaking-tastic. This happened to me when I was 17 years old in 2014. My family always got together with our relatives for the holidays, but this year my dad wanted to do something different and surprised us with a trip to Breckenridge to ski the day after Christmas to the day before New Year's Eve. We were a skiing family, but I was never that great at it and didn't push myself on the slopes like my brother did, who was and is still a maniac on a snowboard. The best thing was that we both got to ask a friend to go along with us, so I asked my friend Sophie, and with some pleading, her parents gave her the okay. My brother, Chris, was 20 and home from college, and he brought his stoner buddy Jamie along. Jamie was very smart, extremely good-looking, and hilarious. So, the day after Christmas, we left Grand Junction with 2 vehicles. My parents and all the gear in their Suburban, and the 4 of us in Chris's old Blazer. It was almost 3 hours to get out there, so we were just munching on snacks and fighting over what music we should listen to. And by the time we got to the resort, we were all ready to get outside and get some skiing in. There was the usual jumble of getting our room and all that, but soon we were out in the white stuff having a good time and tearing it up. Jamie and Chris disappeared for some other recreation. I wonder what they were doing. And Sophie and I stayed with my parents for a bit before taking off on our own. It was getting on in the day, and we were hitting Springmire, which isn't too difficult, but I didn't want to push myself right away. I just wanted to enjoy things. Sophie took a spill, and I stopped to help her when these 2 guys came up and asked if we were okay. I said, "Yeah, thanks." "What are your names?" "I'm Mike, and this is Kirk," said one of the guys. Yeah, not their real names. I suppose I should mention that. I replied with our names to be polite, but I could tell these guys were way older than us, and older than my brother, too, probably like 26 or 27. I wasn't super cool with it, but I didn't want to be a bitch, and while I thought it was odd they were talking with us, it was always good to have as many friends out on the slopes as possible. We chatted for a minute while Sophie messed with her binding, and then we said, "Well, it was nice meeting you. See you around." Sophie and I got our act together and pushed away from them, and I swear I heard the Mike guy say, "I want to see that girl naked." I mentioned this to Sophie on the way down, but she didn't hear anything, so I just wrote it off as maybe I misheard them. We met up with my parents and went back to our lodge on the mountain where we were staying. My brother and Jamie showed up with the red eye and nicely toasted, and I was hoping maybe I could get in on that later. I don't smoke that much, but I have and I do once in a while. The condo we were staying in had 3 bedrooms and bathrooms, so it was easy for all of us to get ready for dinner while the others hung out and waited. My parents are pretty chill and allow me to have a beer or a glass of wine with them, and only with them. It's a rule I never broke while living under their roof, underage, and I figured if they were going to treat me like an adult, I'd better act like one. So I was having a glass of wine, chatting with my mom and playing on my phone, and I thought about those guys again. Maybe I was just being stuck up. I'm not, though, and I hate saying this in the story, but I know I'm not a dog, and I had my share of guys wanting to date me at the time, but I don't want Uncle Josh or other listeners to think I'm some sort of princess. Anyway, the guys were nice, there was just a weird vibe about them. And later, we all went to dinner, we're just laughing and having a good time, when I looked over and saw Mike. He was sitting at a table by himself looking at his phone, but suddenly he looked up and stared right at me. He smiled and waved, and I just nodded back. At this point, I didn't want to go off the deep end, but I have to admit, of all the places at Breckenridge, it was odd to think that somehow he was staying at the same place, or at least chose to eat at the same place we did. After dinner, we went back to our condo, and Sophie and I started talking about boys and her boyfriend. I had broken up with mine after I caught him making out with another girl at our homecoming dance. Apparently, he had a thing for heavier girls, of which I was not one. Oh well, he was a jerk. My mom came into our room and said there was a boy on the phone calling for me, and that he had met me and Sophie earlier that day, and did I want to talk to him. What the hell? If this was Mike, how the hell did he get our condo number? And how weird was it to just call me up when I didn't even know him? Well, I got up and got on the phone and said, "Hello? Hey, it's me, Mike. We met this afternoon. Hope I'm not bothering you." No. How did you get this number?" "Oh, that. I have a friend who works at the lodge and I asked about you. I don't want to creep you out, and I guess I'm sort of doing that right now. I just wanted to see if we could meet up tomorrow." I don't know. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Sorry, but I think you're a little too old for me." "I doubt it. I'm only 19. How old are you?" 17, but listen, I gotta go." "Okay, well, maybe I'll see you out there. Good night." And then he hung up the phone. My mom asked who that was, and I told my parents the story about how we met, and my mom said, "Oh, maybe he's just smitten." My dad said if I didn't want him around, he could make that easier for him, and I laughed, saying, "Stop it, Dad." I went to tell Sophie, and she thought I was being a brat. "He likes you, so what?" And he's 19. He's not too old to just hang out and ski. Rob was 18 and you dated him for over a year. I guess she was right, but I was still wary about this guy. The next day we were out early and Chris and Jamie were goofing off with us, but were planning on going farther up the peaks for some terrain that was way beyond my ability. So Sophie and I were on our own again, but we didn't see Mike or Kirk at all, and that made me feel better. The next day, somehow we got mixed up on the mountain and somehow got onto a trail called Lower 4 O'Clock or something, and it took us all the way down to the base of the mountains. Sophie and I needed to get transportation up to the lodge again, so we decided to walk to the gondola that would take us there. No sooner than we had sat down, and so did, you guessed it, Mike and Kirk. Sophie started chatting with Kirk right away, and Mike started talking to me. "How's it going? Do you like it here?" "Yeah, it's really great," I said. "I'm originally from Vermont, but I have to say this is the best skiing I've ever had." "That's nice. Are you here on vacation?" He said, "No, I live here now, and sometimes I stay at the lodges to get away from my parents. Hey, what are you two doing tonight? There's some live music going on. It should be a lot of fun." I was about to say I didn't think so, but Sophie popped in with, "Yeah, that sounds cool." I glared at her and reluctantly agreed, and he told us where it was going to happen, and then got off at a different lodge and said, "See you tonight." Once they were gone, I looked at Sophie and asked, "What the hell was that?" She replied, "Oh, come on, why not? He's cute enough for you, isn't he?" And I said, "Sophie, that's not the point." She said, "Live a little, princess." So that's how we ended up going to a lounge that night. We told my parents a white lie about it being open to everyone, but Mike had said it was 21 and over, but he could sneak us in. Kirk was there too, and at first things were cool. There was a band playing Dave Matthews covers and some other artists. Mike bought me a glass of wine, and no one seemed to notice that we were underage, or maybe they just didn't care. Like I said, I try not to go behind my parents' backs with alcohol, but I figured one glass would be okay. When Mike brought me another one, I made the decision to sip it very slowly, as even the one glass made me buzzy. I was surprised we were having a good time, but as it got closer to 11:30, I told Sophie we should be heading out. We were supposed to be back at the condo by midnight. But then I started to feel funny, like really, really drunk or high. My head started to hurt, and Sophie noticed and was asking if I was okay. All I remembered saying was, "I think I need to go back and lie down." Mike said he would take me back home. It was a short walk, and he said the cold air would make me feel better. But I didn't know it yet. He had other plans. Mainly, the back of this van. Somehow, Sophie got lost in the crowd, and she didn't see Mike leading me outside. I was in and out, and long story short, I was roofied. I remember it being very cold and Mike pulling my leggings and panties down, but that was it. I couldn't remember anything else. What I didn't know was that Kirk was running interference with Sophie. Jamie just happened to be walking by the lounge and saw Mike taking me out. He ran to get my brother, and when they caught up to us, Mike was getting on top of me in the back of the van. This was all told to me by my brother and Jamie, but they ripped the doors of the van open, dragged him off of me, and while he was floundering around in the snow with his pants down, they made sure he wouldn't be bothering me anymore. Jamie even broke the ends of Mike's snowboard right there in the parking lot. Sophie and Kirk came running up, and he tried playing the fool, saying he didn't know what was going on, and my brother just smashed him one in the face, and he fell down. They got me back to the condo and into bed without my parents knowing what had happened, but I felt awful the next day. Chris and Jamie did some asking around and found out that Mike really was 27 years old. 27. We all talked about me telling my parents and the resort people, but I didn't want to get into trouble, and the only thing that was really hurt was my stomach and my feelings. I was out of commission for just the next day, but up and skiing the day after. Jamie made it a point to let all the other hardcore locals know what happened with Mike, and no one saw him or Kirk for the rest of the week while we were there. Sophie thought I was mad at her, but I was more scared and angry at myself for even getting into that situation in the first place. Live and learn, I guess. So, to the nearly 30-year-old Mike who tried to rape a 17-year-old kid, you're lucky you got off with just a beating. Merry Christmas wherever you are, asshole. Thanks for reading the story if you do. Strange Christmas, submitted by Anna. I hail from Germany, but I now live in the United States. When I was a little girl before my family moved here, we lived in a little town called Bern. It's about 35 kilometers south of the North Sea and surrounded by farmland. This was back in about 1975 when my cousins from the U.S. came to visit on Christmas. I think I was 15 at the time, and we were all good friends as family goes. My cousins Jürgen and Andrea were around my age with me and my brother Paul. We had a great time and took them to the sea and to Bremen, which was bigger than our town, and even now I remember Jürgen pleading to visit Berlin, but that was much too far away to go while they were here. My tante and uncle spent most of their time speaking with my parents, so it gave us lots of time to come and go as we wanted. One night after Christmas, the four of us decided a walk was best after dinner. Paul said we could walk to the Vatsa River, which was not too far away, and see if any ships were going by to Bremen. We got bundled up, and everyone said it was okay to go, so away we went. There was another village on our walk to the river, and when we walked into it, a man from a house on the road came out and yelled at us for walking in the road. We were doing no such thing and just kept walking, and Paul yelled back, "Sei bleib still," which means shut up. Jürgen asked if that was how people were here, and Paul and I laughed when he said a man like that would be beaten yelling out like that in Philadelphia, which is where he and Andrea were from. We always laughed together because our English was not so good, and their German was also not so good. We made our way to the river, and we didn't get much snow there, so we could walk on the little beach and look across to see the ferry and what we call a power station in America. There weren't many ships going by, but we had fun throwing rocks into the water and answering questions about the river. No one had noticed that the man from earlier had followed us down to this place and then yelled out, "Who told him to shut up?" We all turned around to see him walking towards us with a bottle in his hand. He was clearly betrunken, and Jürgen asked what he had said. When Paul told him, Jürgen, who was a big boy for his age, said, "I did. What are you going to do about it?" The man didn't know English, but as he walked towards us, we could tell he was very angry and very drunk. Before long, he was standing in front of us and yelling things we couldn't understand. And then he grabbed at Andrea and tried to pull her to the water, but Jürgen and Paul grabbed him and hit at him. The man then broke his bottle and shoved it at Paul, and he got badly cut even through his coat on his arm, and Jürgen began to hit the man more and knocked him down. He kicked at the man and told us to run, and all four of us did. Paul was still bleeding, but it wasn't as bad as much as we thought. But when we got home, my Frau was upset and took him to get cleaned up with the bandages. My Vater and uncle got into the car and drove to the river and found the man still lying on the sand, and they called the police on him. They told what happened, and the man got in big trouble for attacking children. When they came home to see how we were all pretty scared, and Paul was feeling better, though. They said that the man was going to jail, and that they were proud for taking care, but next time we should run first before fighting. We had a fun night at home even after that with games and food, and before we went to bed, my uncle told us, "Das Leben ist kein Ponyhof," which is sort of saying things don't always go your way, but again said he was happy we were raised to take care of things on our own. I hope this was scary enough. I like your stories very much. Merry Christmas. Love, Anna. The Drive Home, submitted by Carol. First off, I'm going to say that I'll bet no one will believe this happened to me, and that's okay. But it did, and I'm not some nut, and I don't suffer from any mental diseases or whatever. I'm an extremely healthy 32-year-old woman who is a fitness junkie, and I'm into ultramarathons and triathlons. In fact, I qualified for Kona this year, and I can't wait to do it. Anyway, this happened last year on my drive home to my parents' house in Asheville, North Carolina. I live in Atlanta now, but I always make the trek home to be with my brothers and sisters and parents on the holidays, regardless of my training schedule. I just load up my Specialized and other gear, and I hit the road. It's only a 3-hour drive, so that never phases me. But this time, something did. My college roommate had just passed away after a bout with opioid addiction. She got hooked on painkillers after an injury she suffered on a 24-hour relay we both competed in, and it's amazing how quick doctors prescribe that stuff and how fast the drugs take over their lives. Sue was a great friend, and I was broken when she left us at just 31 years old. But this trip home, I wasn't thinking about her as much as I normally did. It was part of my grieving to dedicate myself to doing as best as I could in my races, and doing it to raise awareness of opioid addiction at the same time. I got into my Subaru, loaded for home late on a Friday evening, ready to battle local traffic, and looking forward to being in my childhood home for a couple of days and getting some miles in on the bike, and feet, and maybe swimming at the JCC. My job was going well, I had met a new guy who I really liked, and I felt on top of the world. It was about an hour into my drive that I noticed a strange smell in my car. It was subtle at first, but got stronger pretty quick. The best way I can tell it was that it smelled like roadkill mixed with metal. I mean, ever taste a penny or a zinc tablet? It was like that, but only it was in the air. Just before I got to Greenville, South Carolina, the smell got close to overbearing, and I rolled down my window and then looked in my rearview mirror. And here's where my story gets crazy. In the back seat of my Forester sat my beautiful friend Sue. She looked pale and thin, but she still had that beauty of strength in her eyes, but she also seemed tired. She was looking right into the mirror at me with no real expression on her face, just looking at me. I almost drove off the highway, but kept in control and, like in a dream state, said, "Sue, is that really you?" She said in a barely audible whisper, "Yes." I mean, I knew it was impossible, but there she was. I tried to talk to her, but she didn't say any other words other than, "I want to go home." For about 5 minutes, there she was every time I looked back at her, and then, just like that, she was gone. I cried and thought about calling my sister, but figured I was getting closer to home and I'd see her in a little while anyway. I was very upset and kept looking in my mirror, hoping to see Sue there, and I started asking her to come back to the point where I was yelling it out. I should mention that she'd been gone for over 6 months at this point. Well, I got off the road outside of Hendersonville to get gas, and I sat there in the car so upset and just sobbing my heart out. The gas station attendant actually came out to talk to me to see if I was okay, because I'd been sitting at a pump for about 15 minutes. I told him I was fine, just a little sad, and he offered to pump my gas for me. While he was doing it, I looked into my mirror, and there in the back seat was Sue again, and the same smell was permeating the air. I almost screamed, but only said out of the window to the gas guy, "Hey, do you see her?" And I jerked a thumb towards my back seat. He looked at me with a strange look, looked into the back of my car, and then said, "Who?" I told him never mind, and then looked back. There she was. I paid for the gas and said thanks and Merry Christmas and got back on the road with Sue in my rearview mirror still. "Sue!" I yelled once I was back on the highway. She just looked at me and said the same thing as before. "I want to go home." Then, just like before, she vanished. I got back to my childhood home in my parents' house, and tired and more than upset. Daddy knew something was wrong and offered me a hot toddy and pulled me aside from my other family who were all around the dining room table drinking and laughing. "You okay?" he asked, and I told him the whole thing. Sue and I had originally met because he was good friends with Sue's father through business. He was quiet for a while and then gave me a huge hug, and while in his arms he told me that Sue's grave marker and gravesite had been vandalized earlier that day. Sue's mom had gone out to clean it up and put some flowers on it and found it partially dug up, and there was paint that had been sprayed over the marble marker. They have no idea who did it. I burst into tears, and my daddy held me so tight and just comforted me. The next day, Sue's father and brother went out and cleaned up her site and got the paint off the stone. The grave hadn't been robbed or anything, but it was just messed with. I called them and told them how sorry I was, but I kept the other story to myself. I didn't see Sue again, and hope that she has moved on to wherever she needs to be. In a way, it was comforting to see her again, but I wonder if I only did see her because her final resting place had been disturbed. Merry Christmas, Sue. I miss you, and I love you. Hey gang, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and more to come as always. Do me a favor, please send me your true scary stories at unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. Your submissions make this channel unique and what makes this channel go. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you like what you've heard, and make sure you hit that little bell to get notifications of every time that I upload. Also, if you're interested, follow me on social media. All of the links to that are in the description below. And of course, if you would like to support this page, please visit my Patreon page and consider becoming a patron of the show. For as little as $1 a month, you will get early access to my uploads, as well as some other perks, and I'm looking to do another t-shirt giveaway. Hopefully you guys will dig that as well. Everybody, be excellent to each other in this holiday season. Merry Christmas, and remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.